Well, welcome back to CityLine. Joining me now are co-authors of the Showtime in Tacoma book that was recently released, authors Blaine Johnson and Brian Kamens, and welcome to CityLine.
Thank
Glad
you.
to be here.
Now, first of all, you described the book as a labor of love. How did the idea of this book develop?
Well, it sort of emerged from, I guess, a convergence of several different initial agendas. Murray Morgan, historian, had started doing some essays on theaters in the early 90s, and with his passing, it just ended up sitting in a box, and his daughter, Elaine Morgan.
That was one of the last subjects he'd been working on before he passed.
And so his daughter gave us the rights to those pieces. And so then we started with the idea of that 2018 is the 100th anniversary for the Pantages Theater and the Rialto, and the 25th anniversary of the Theater on the Square. And the late Babe Blair had started a book on Alexander Pantages. So initially we were going to do a book that was going to be one half of each of the topics, and each of those got bigger. So we went on with this collection of, really it's, I think, trying to get people to more appreciate the roots of Tacoma through the cultural scene.
We'd find new material that we just couldn't resist keeping out of the book, so it got larger and larger as much as we could do it. Sure. And it just shows pride in Tacoma. Tacoma may not be perfect, but we have an incredible history, including the theaters in the theater district, and everybody really enjoys it. And it's just.
And it should be noted that Brian's 30-some years as archivist in building the Tacoma Building Index is really the foundation for all the detail we had.
Yeah, we've got a big house and building index. So over 25 years ago now, people would come into the library, wanted a history of their house, but unless you were the Weyerhaeuser mansion or something like that, there wasn't anything.
Right.
Then I happened to stumble across an article in the Ledger of 1901 that had a picture of over 50 houses in Tacoma. Mm-hmm. So it inspired me to start indexing by address the buildings in Tacoma. Originally as a hobby on my lunch hour, and I ended up reading every daily paper, every Sunday paper from 1883 to 1966, and ended up scanning the weekly papers. It sounds like, get a life, but it was a lot more interesting than it was. And of course, a big part of that was theaters. And there's some buildings in town that the owners didn't even know that they were originally theaters. And just fascinating. And of course, I remember as a kid going to triple theaters at the local motion picture show, and saw Star Wars in Pantages before it was closed for renewal. But much of it is a celebration of civic pride. Also, it tells the story of downtown, both as a theater district, as a meeting place. They say that 9th and Broadway is pretty much, there it is right there, the soul of Tacoma. That 11th Pacific was always the business center, but 9th and Broadway is where the real things happened, kind of like Tacoma's living room, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that was the opening of the Broadway Theater that was originally Opera House, and they converted to motion pictures. They got so popular in the 20s.
Nice.
But,
so what brought the two of you together?
When we restored a building that originally had been the Savoy Theater on 708 Broadway, and so year 2000, along with another partner, Warren Foster, and I took that building and completely restored it, and in the process of applying for the historic designation, I met Brian in his role with the library Northwest Room, and so that then developed, we created Opera Alley, where Over the Moon Cafe is, and so we did that project in 2001, and then eventually did Ben Gilbert Park with the big mural of the crowd gathered for the 1926 World Series in front of the Ledger building. So these things all had links to physical projects that we were doing, community projects, and then Brian and I just continuing to research together.
They renamed it the Passages Building because it was quite a passage of activity through the years, because it was pretty in bad shape when they got it, and they've just did an incredible job restoring it. And the theater happened to be the only theater on the West Coast run by women at the time, the Savoy Theater. But if you're down on Broadway, take a look at it. It's a great building.
Nice. So the Pantages and Rialto theaters celebrate their 100th anniversary this year, and what do they represent to the city's cultural heritage in the area?
Well, certainly the Pantages restoration community effort that Don Lucian and Virginia Shackelford and others started, the development or the idea of redeveloping what had become the Roxy Theater and was quite run down, and downtown itself was unfortunately heading into an era of blight. And so the idea was if they could restore this as a great performance venue again, and it turned out that effort in the early 80s is considered the kind of the launch pad for the downtown renaissance.
So it was really the citizens themselves that saved the theater. And that led shortly afterwards to the saving of Union Depot, which was also a citizen-led group that did that. And that's led to our current environment where historic preservation is very popular.
And the Murray Morgan Bridge, 11th Street Bridge, was another community effort. So those ties back to, first of all, the Tacoma Theater being built as a community pride project by the Tacoma Land Company and the city founders in 1890, and then that emanated from there to the Pantages.
There's the Broadway or the Tacoma Theater. And the book is chock full of interesting stories on the theaters. One of my favorites, Virginia Shackelford, who helped save the Pantages. When she was a kid, her father was in vaudeville. His show was The Great Lester, and he would saw her in half on stage. And she remembers in the Pantages, when she was being sawed in half, that straight up above was a skylight. Well, the skylight had been painted over. Nobody knew it was there, and nobody believed her. And sure enough, when they did the restoration, they found the skylight that she remembered. And
wow,
just a great story.
Now, last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago now, we found out about Eyes of the Totem. And what is the significance of that film, do you believe,
That was one of the
region?
greatest events I've been to in Tacoma. A lot of people don't know that there was a silent motion picture studio near Titlow Beach that made 3 films. And one of them was Eyes of the Totem. And we all thought they were gone. With various detective work, including from the Historic Preservation Department, they found a copy at a museum, the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Eventually, the museum donated the film to Tacoma, and we had a re-premiere 90 years after it was first shown at the Rialto Theater. Everybody wore period costumes, and it was just a fantastic evening. And not that many silent films are left at all, so to find one that was made in Tacoma was just spectacular. And that was a community event as well, a lot of big backers, including extras in the cast. And it's really a great film. I'm sure they'll be showing it again before too long. Definitely worth seeing it. But unfortunately, the talkies put the studio out of business.
Sure.
But for a while, they called the area Hollywood by the Sea. And it's just a great story.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Showtime in Tacoma, the book. And we're running low on time here. So give a brief description about the book and where people can buy it.
Well, the book's available. We did it as as we said, a labor of love, where Brian and I donated our time for the actual creation of the book, and then we got sponsors locally to underwrite the production costs, and so Tacoma Historical Society Press is the entity that all proceeds go to.
And it is a fundraiser, right?
Right, and so it's available at Tacoma Historical Society, what is it,
919 Pacific Avenue.
Right, and they're open Wednesdays through Saturdays for 11 to 4. Leroy Jewelers, Watermark on A Street, Pacific Northwest Shop are three
All
other
carry the
outlets.
book.
Okay,
Right.
very nice.
And again, as Brian said, it's just loaded with anecdotes and a lot of fun stories going all the way back to the original box houses on Pacific Avenue, all the way up through into the 60s with a lot of the music scene and that sort of thing. And essentially, the full title is Now Playing Showtime in Tacoma. And the point is, this is living history. This is to augment what right now is the community experience. And so it's deep history taking us to really set the table for a lot of the cultural and we call it sort of the soul of Tacoma experience.
We cover a lot of the groups that are still around, like Tacoma Little Theater.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 12 different current arts groups and their history in there as well, plus the museums and that full range of, as we say, the next era that's now being played out.
Well, very good. Unfortunately, we run out of time, but Blaine Johnson and Brian Kamens, authors of Showtime in Tacoma, thanks again for joining us today on CityLine.
Thanks so much.
And we'll be back with a look at the book Around the World in 80 Wines. Please stay with us.